California and a red clay of Georgia.
What's up, everybody? Today is Friday, October 9th, 2020. This is A Talk in the Attic, making me your host, Kirk Ross. My guest today is Roland Welker, one of the baddest mamma jammas alive. Some of you are probably asking, well, what's this guy doing out in the middle of the woods all on his own? Before I go and explain what on earth I'm doing out here, allow me to issue this official spoiler alert. Particularly to any of you listeners out there who are fans of History Channel's revolutionary and Spartan program Alone. Today's episode is all about Roland Welker, including his experience on the show, so if you don't want to know what happened in the most recent installment, then turn the podcast off immediately and go to history.com, where you can find every single episode of all 7 amazing seasons. Look, it's probably clear at this point I'm kind of just stalling a little bit so that y'all can dip out before the spoilers hit, but it's got to have been long enough by now, right? Okay, here goes. Roland Welker is the winner of Alone Season 7. The most difficult and extreme challenge yet, which pit 10 highly skilled survivalists against the frigid conditions of Canada's Northwest Territories on the Arctic Circle, people. Unlike seasons past, however, winning Alone wasn't just about outlasting the other 9 contestants for $500,000. It was also about making it 100 full days at the Arctic Circle. For context, I should note that in the first 6 seasons, the average length of competition was roughly 70 days. That's not to suggest that 70 days at places like Vancouver Island or Patagonia or Mongolia or Great Slave Lake is easy. So no disrespect whatsoever to any of the previous champs or any of the survivalists for that matter. Hell, it's 65 degrees and sunny right now where I'm at. I've only been out here for 35 minutes and I'm strongly considering calling my wife to come pick me up. But who in their right mind would even consider attempting such a challenge? Which brings us back to Roland Welker, who may or may not be in his right mind, but a man who I would say is cut from the same cloth as the great frontiersmen who came before him. But that would kind of imply that Roland is cut from cloth, and cloth is just too soft. So I guess maybe he's cut from the same bear skin? Carved from the same granite, maybe? I don't know. Point is, dude is a straight-up beast who has spent his entire life testing the edge of his limits with an intensity I've never had the pleasure of seeing with my own 2 eyes. Until now, of course. By the time Roland spent Christmas Day 2019 celebrating his victory at Great Slave Lake with his sister Meg, he had been trapping for 40 years. So from the time he was 8 years old. We get into Roland's background in rural Pennsylvania. We'll discuss what influenced a young man in the 1970s to pursue a way of life that most of us might consider strange. But most of us don't have 100% old-timer blood coursing through our steely veins, do we? Of course, we'll talk about Alone, including Rock House, Berry Log, Danger Rock, and of course the legendary dispatch of a nearly 800-pound muskox, which all but sealed the deal for his impending victory. Before finishing the show up with a few questions from his fans on Reddit, Roland lays out the concept for his one-man show idea. I'm not going to spoil that for you, but we definitely need to make it happen. Some of you are still wondering, hey, what's this guy doing out in the woods? He never answered me. It's simple. I decided that for me to even present an interview with Roland Welker of the Welker and Maines clan of Shiloh, Pennsylvania, I had no choice but to take to the woods myself. Leave behind all of the creature comforts that we've all come to take for granted and bring nothing but a microphone, a camera, and a hatchet that I just purchased at Ace Hardware. So while you're all listening or watching A Talk in the Attic number 64, I'll be out here roughing it on a vision quest for my own personal truth and hopefully a sustainable source of protein. I want to thank the Michigan Podcasting Network for their support. I also want to thank Joe Gentleman, the talented musician responsible for the theme song up top. In fact, Joe is also one of 3 musicians who provided cover versions of Waylon Jennings' Lonesome, Ornery, and Mean, which, as you might have guessed, is Roland Welker's favorite song of all time. In fact, we're going to let Joe Gentleman's version play us into the discussion with Roland Welker, the 100-day king, the last bushman of Kuskokwim, and the baddest mother effer alive. I hope y'all will enjoy it, but now you're going to have to excuse me, because I'm going to go up over this ridge over here, see if I can't scrounge up a little grub. Let's start the show.
Sweet, if them to the beggar was mumbling through the street. There's no escaping This snowy white dreams, born looking lonesome, ornery and me. Now I'm down in this valley where the wheels turn slow. At dawn I pray, the Lord of my soul. I say to Lord, do right by me. I'm tired of being lonesome, ornery and me.
So where are you right now? Are you in Alaska?
No, I'm in Oklahoma just now. I get around. I get around all over, big broad. I've been doing that a long time too. Got nothing to do with the show, but I was deep bush for years and years and years. I'm out doing my hunts. I'm hunting right now.
So is that for pleasure? Are you doing guiding along the way, or how's that all look?
I'm still guiding. I got some hunts of my own too.
That's great. So I think obviously we'll talk about the show. That's people are interested in that. You're talking a lot about that on your YouTube channel as well. But if you don't mind, let's get into a little bit about what made you interested. You know, how does a kid from Pennsylvania in the 70s end up becoming super interested in bushcraft and the wilderness?
Yes, well, I'm from central Pennsylvania, so that's a little different than a lot of people's conception of Pennsylvania. There's some pretty big woods in Pensy. I was born on the edge of the Moshannon State Forest, which is sort of part of the Alleghenies, and it's big country for East Country. And then I grew up into a logging and coal mining family, a little bit of farming, hillbilly type farming. And we're very close to the land, my family. So I wanted, as a young boy, I wanted to be like my father or my uncle or my grandpap or their friends. You know, I see these big men doing this amazing stuff. And so I started tackling that stuff very young, very young.
So what was the first kind of real woodsy project you remember getting into as a little guy?
Oh, as a little guy, I mean, even before I started trapping, Dad bought me, I think I saved up lawn mowing money and bought my own hatchet. And he was building a new house, and there's a bunch of trees in the back, and, you know, some of them were just right size for a young boy. And every night after school, I would go cut down as many trees as I could with hatchet and trim them up. And I had this huge pile of poles, and Dad bought them off of me for firewood. You know, he probably paid too much, but stuff like that just all along. And then the fur boom come along. There was a fur boom in the 80s. My uncle was a country buyer. He bought animals on the carcass right down the road, and there was hillbillies lugging that stuff in from all over, and it was selling. And I was only 8, you know, so I started out skinning possums, and by 9, 10 I was up to coon, and then he began ranching mink, and I was his head pelter all through my teenage years. My dad's brother was a big influence.
Oh, that's great. So, and I see now you're surrounded by some beautiful animals. So when did you start getting going from fur trapping and that sort of thing into big game hunting? When did that transition happen?
That happened when I was 24. I went to Alaska and got on for an outfit packing for the year. I actually went to work for Wayne Woods. He's a longtime outfitter up there. He had a big camp that year, lots of people, and he was hiring packers. He wanted 3 of them. And I was already going to Alaska. I was already headed there, had my pickup all tricked out with extra springs for all my gear and traps. And so he ran an ad in the National Trapper magazine. He was a trapper as well. And so I started calling him up and trying to secure this position. And I got it and got, when I first went up, I went clear to Fairbanks and then on up into the Yukon River country and had a job up there too. But then come hunting season, I drove clear back down to Palmer, and he throwed me and another packer in a 206 and shot us clear out to Western Alaska. That's how I discovered Western Alaska.
So
huge.
So I'm from Michigan, and you know, even though Alaska's part of the U.S., obviously we don't learn a lot about that in school. What's kind of the lay of the land up there? And when you say Western Alaska, what's that really mean?
Western Alaska. It's, you know, when people think about Alaska, they're thinking about Denali or the the railroad or southeast or the North Slope. You always hear about the North Slope. Southwest interior Alaska is a mammoth chunk of country due west from Anchorage across the Alaska Range. There's no road. You can't get there from here unless you're in an airplane. I did drive a snow machine over once. It took 50 gallons of gas in 3 days. But you know, it's just this place you never heard of, the Kuskokwim River. Nobody heard of the Kuskokwim River, second largest river in the state, full of big rivers, and it's the largest one that originates in Alaska. The only river that's bigger is the Yukon.
Yeah.
And so when I hit that place, I was like, I'm staying here.
So explain that feeling. I mean, you talked in the show, and I can tell just by talking to you now, you always wanted to be out in the wilderness. You know, at first it started because you were maybe emulating your heroes, but what was the draw to just such a remote, untouched spot?
Yeah, it was like I always wanted to be one of the frontier. Always felt I should have been one of the frontiersmen or mountain men settling the American continent, not necessarily just the West. There was some real wild stuff happened in the East if you go back far enough. Right. And I never got to have that because I was born in the 70s and growed up in the 80s. So here I am. I get to Western Alaska. These guys are doing all these hunting trips out of wall tents and stuff, and there's all this vast country. You can't even believe it till you see it. Till you lay eyes on this kind of country. I could talk about it all day long, and you won't get it. So there I am, late fall, winter's coming on, and then I decided to stay and trap. The whole outfit flew away back to Palmer, and I stayed in Western Alaska and trapped marten and wolverine out of a wall tent for the winter. I didn't even I had no phone, no radio, no nothing. I was sitting out there listening to the wind blow. And that feeling, that feeling is as close as you're going to get to a pioneer. Alaska's so close yet to the pioneering days. That was only 100 years ago in Alaska. And it was only 70 years ago when I went.
Yeah, and you have a different level of vulnerability when you don't have, even on a loan, you have the beacon. If something really happened, you could do that. In this case, you were just out there legit on your own. There was no one coming to you.
Oh, it was pre-sat phone. I didn't even take a handheld radio. I wasn't even smart enough to take an AM radio to listen to. I got nothing. I told the pilot to pick me up in the best weather the week of. Whatever week, that 2 months later that week, You're sitting there with your tent all empty, your traps all shut off, just waiting for an airplane that's days away yet, probably. Thank God he came and got me.
No kidding. I mean, even when you're sitting there during that time, there's probably no even imagination of a possible opportunity to win a bunch of money doing that. You go into you wanted to be a frontiersman, you didn't want to win money, right? So it's such a strange kind of meshing of things.
Right. There was no money involved. I've had some good jobs in my day, but if I don't want to do something, you can't pay me enough, and if I want to do it, the money don't matter. So I wasn't out there for the money at the time. I was out there for the rush. I mean, I had to go do that. But then the whole time I'm doing that as a young man, some of the family and other people were like, what are you doing? And now it's coming. This is a 40-year career. I started trapping when I was 8. I'm 48. This is 40-year career. Banging right now.
You did it. You timed it perfectly. Right on your 40th anniversary, they said, let's do Great Slave Lake for 100 days.
Oh, I'll never forget where I was at when they told me it was a 100-day challenge for $1 million. Yeah. And I was, I'm in the lineup for that money.
I mean, so with that experience, not just the cold weather experience, which I think in and of itself has to be important, but also the ability to have been alone for that long. I mean, the psychological part, you really were prepared.
I got the edge on everybody when it comes to being alone. I really don't like being with people.
Well, okay, I'll let you go.
I'm not a team player. I do my best work alone, so it was perfect in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, what an incredible coming full circle, I guess, is how I'll put it. So when did you decide? So when you were a guide, right? That's most of your career, most of your adulthood in Alaska. You're a guide. Does that mean that you're taking people out on hunts and you're showing them the way and all of that, or can you explain a little bit about what that really entails?
Right. I'm a registered guide. I'm not just a guide. registered guide allows you to deal with the public and get some land use and conduct big game hunts in Alaska. They got the most stringent rules of any of them. You know, you don't just go hang your shingle out and say you're going to be a guide up there. You know, they got rules against that stuff. So I jumped through all the state's hoops to get registered, and Western Alaska is some of the remotest there is, and you know, we're taking these people that have zero wilderness skills and getting them. I mean, we're like the recon of the hunting world. We're flying in, scoring, and flying out before the next weather front pins us all down, you know, and getting another batch of hunters into the transition. It's very stressful.
So do you rely on other pilots, or are you able to fly too, or how's that scene look up in Alaska? I know that most places, or a lot of the places you're going to, are by plane only.
Yes, lots of airplane. I hire all my flying done. I can't do both. You're either a ground man or you're a pilot. Got it.
So when you took down the muskox, that wasn't your first time field dressing a big ass animal.
Right. I've literally hacked up and carried tons and tons, multiple tons of meat out on my back. I got pack frames sawed through by moose teeth that rode on there through the years, you know. 150-pound pack all day long. Yeah, I've done it lots.
So like that's another example of just being so well experienced in this. But before we get into the show details, what's a crazy experience that you had out there, either on your own or as a registered guide, that's something that you're only going to see in Alaska or somewhere like that?
Yeah, I mean, I got hundreds of stories like that. I'll give you a kind of a recent one. You know, stories can get long.
That's great.
I'll try to shorten it up. I was already talking to the History Channel and production about it, but I wasn't in yet. It was still the process of maybe getting in, but you can't tell nobody, of course. So I'm doing all that at the same time. Well, I go to Anchorage for my spring hunts, and then we get flown out, and we were on top of the mountain. I had a New Jersey client come, and he had never been camping before in his life. And as soon as we get dropped, it's starting to snow just a little wee bit. And by the time I get him in, now it's snowing a little more. The airplanes get away, and I am on top of the mountain. I dig down, I got to dig down like 4 or 5 feet of snowpack, get the tent up. Well, that's all standard procedure.
Yeah, that's a day at the office.
Yeah, I mean, that's just how it is. So, but then that night we wake up, it's dark, and it's snowing hard. I mean, it's snowing sideways, pitch black. And the tent's coming in. And I get up and go outside with my headlamp, and here it's snowing so much it's filling in the tent hole. It's actually going to cave us in. So I shovel it all out. Long story. And I'm soaked. I am soaking ass wet. Go back in, get all them wet clothes off, jump in my sleeping bag, put my dry clothes on. 3 hours later, the tent's caving in again. Take off my dry clothes, put on all my wet clothes, go out in there with the headlamp, muck it all out again. For 30 hours, it snowed. Every 3 hours for 30 hours, I got up, put on my wet clothes, and went out and cleared that tent. You had to. It was caving in if you didn't.
Right.
And there's more to do that, but it'll take up too much time.
But I mean, that's a risk of hypothermia every time you're doing that to some extent, isn't there?
Yeah, you can get sick maybe, but I never get sick. Or you could get lost. I don't get lost. You could get all kinds of things, but you got to be ready, man. You got to, like, I didn't feel like putting them wet. It was tempting to go out with your dry clothes on you were sleeping in, but you can't do that. Then they'd have been soaked too. I changed into them soaking ass wet clothes every time I went out.
Yeah, I mean, well, let's face it, Roland, you were supposed to have been born back, I don't know, 400 or 500 years ago or 300 years ago or something. So you maybe wouldn't get hypothermic. A guy like me, I don't think I would make it too long doing that, but I would certainly try. I guess if you're in a position.
That's what I'm there for. You stay in your sleeping bag.
That's true. Yeah. So when do you go from, first off, I can't imagine you're watching a lot of TV in general. You're not a TV guy.
I watch the show until once I was in the process, then I began watching it to pick up some camera moves and just to see how things.
But yeah, I think you're really good at the cinematography. I love the scene where you had the whiteout and you kind of set the tripod down and we're kind of like just tracing back and forth. That was such a It actually worried me for a second that you actually were getting lost, but of course you weren't. It felt that way. But talk about going from one of the world's best cold weather guys, one of the world's best guys, to saying, okay, I'm going to try to make this TV show and give that a whirl. Talk a little bit about that decision, and then of course the process, and then we'll get into your experiences out there.
Right. All my clients started showing up talking about this show 7 years ago, and there's this show on History Channel, and then they'd explain it, and they said, you'd be so good at that. I told them all, get me in there, I'll win it, I'll do it. And they're all like, because I know it would take somebody on the computer to get me in there, and they never did. But my sister finally went through all the hoops with me to mean the legwork to get in there, folks, is huge. Oh yeah. So I was aware of the show, and I felt like I could do it. I felt like I wanted the exposure, and I got to show the world all my moves, man. It was okay. Amazing. Let's just get into it, man. Let's just get into it. So let's start with the toolkit. That's kind of your first decision, right? Are you happy with your toolkit? Is there anything you would have swapped out of there? No. My list is, I would take that list anywhere. That really? Was a good list. But then once we pick our tools, we're allowed to, bring our own, the ones we want, it ain't like
right. Some cattle.
Nobody had the same kind of axe. Nobody had the same.
Right.
So there's a lot to it. It takes a long time to figure out what you want to take.
I mean, well, you had 40 years kind of to plan it, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of did know. But 10 items wasn't enough. There's a couple more there I'd have liked to have for sure.
What would you have liked to have?
I'm not going to quite go there because people's going to pit in. I'm going to get so many of my moves stolen already.
Yeah, I hear you.
Seriously.
Yeah. Well,
the ones that got showed are, you're going to see everybody building a meat crib. You're going to see everybody putting berries in a log. I mean, I got to watch what I'm doing here.
That is true. I mean, everyone would probably want to build Rock House too. Talk about Rock House. I mean, that was a lot of work. Those are 150-pound stones, probably, each one of those guys.
Yeah, there was some more than that. You ain't gonna see nobody build Rock House again. it ain't happening, dude. Rock House is going down in history.
It's a shame. Did they deconstruct Rock House the way they do all the other ones?
They did. They took Rock House apart. Where I hated to see that happen. It was a mega structure.
Oh my goodness, those timbers you had on top, it seemed like someone asked me this. I'm on Reddit, which is a social media website, and I was asking some people for questions they wanted me to ask you, fans of yours, okay? And one of them was, you had a pretty low-key door. I think it was like a flap, or just a flap or something. So that would indicate to me that those rocks were keeping the heat enough that you staying warm wasn't an issue, or how did you get away with that?
The flap door was a weak point in the Rock House thing. Everything else was mega and perfect, and the flap worked out. Yeah. And so, I mean, by the time I got all the wood cut and the muskox processed and Rock House tricked out finally, and it was like day 45 or 50 by it's all done, and then it's getting really cold, and you got to cut a lot of wood, and it's if it would have been a longer challenge, I would have came up with a door. Yeah. You were, so what was exactly the span of time you were there? Was it like September through December or something, right? Or Yep. It was late September clear through to Christmas. Because you see the last scene, I made the Christmas tree. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, that ain't the first Christmas I spent in some shanty in the middle of nowhere. I've spent them in wall tents. I've spent them in old log cabins I've made. I've spent them in Red Devil. I spend a lot of Christmases remote. Yeah, but I don't meet other people. But you haven't spent a lot of Christmases with Meg, your sister, showing up at that location though either. So that had to be kind of a special moment, particularly after a lot of the reflection that you had been doing anyway. Yes, you're right. Well, I did. We had no books. We had nothing to read. You couldn't write or anything like that. It wasn't there. Right. And so, I was going back in my mind. Instead of reading, I was dredging up old thoughts and stuff, and then the family stuff. So as we're getting closer, I don't know if Megan's coming or not, how it's going to be, you know, because it ain't done yet.
Right.
But the day that I heard her coming,
yeah.
it was unreal, because I didn't want to let her down either. You know what I mean? I wanted her to come be there and praise the Lord. It happened.
She has to be so excited. I was working with her husband to help set up this interview. They're such nice people. So I'm glad that you had that moment with her. So cool.
I try not to let nobody down.
Yeah, well, he certainly didn't let the viewers down. So let's talk about the musk ox, man. Like when you had the GoPro chesty going, and it looked like a video game of some sort. But take me through the whole process. If you want to get long-winded on this one, go for it. It's your show, my man.
Yeah, well, there was a lot to the hunt. Obviously, it wasn't a mortal strike right off the bat. So, this thing's still alive. And I only carried 2 arrows on that hunt. I had 2 arrows. I broke one, and the other one's in the muskox. And so there I am on the side of the mountain, on the side of the rock. It's getting late in the day. I'm already 2 miles from Rock House, and this thing's not dead. And I know how this goes. It might sit there. Animals don't know when they're licked. Hell, he might walk away, He'll at least walk away, and you might not find him the next day, Or he walks away, and the wolves turn him into, wolf crap in the night. And so my choices was camp out with this thing until it dies, which I didn't have my sleeping bag or nothing, or go back to Rock House and risk it getting away. Well, I have dispatched a couple animals in the past with knife, nothing this big, but so there I am, and there he is, and here's my knife. I thought I'm gonna finish him off right now, and he was pointing the right way where I could get in without him seeing me. I had to wait for him to position himself. Plus, I had a lot of battery left in my camera because the hunt was so dynamic. I couldn't film like I'd have liked to have.
Right.
And I had battery, and thank God I got the cameras set up right, and awesome. I moved in as close as I could to him, planned my strike, planned my escape route, adjusted my GoPro a little bit to make sure it wasn't pointing too far up or too far down, and I couldn't tell, but I figured it was good.
Yeah, dude, it was perfect.
Camera aimed at him, and away we went.
Oh my goodness.
It was you can tell when I first go up to the camera holding the knife and saying that I just stabbed this muskox. I mean, I still get wired talking about it right now.
I mean, the preparation the life that you live and the preparation you had and the skills you have are all great, but that muskox, would you say above all else, I mean, that fed you for the whole time, not necessarily all the nutrients and fat that you needed, but that was kind of the key. Wouldn't you say? I mean, let's put it a different way. If you wouldn't have been able to snag that guy and dispatch him, what would you have continued to do? You would have continued looking. Were you doing any snaring out there?
I had some snares out, but without the muskox, it was still a fight. Without the muskox, I see him. This is the grand prize strolling around. I knowed I had to kill that thing. And the story of the actual hunt's too long to get into. I stayed on him a long time to pull that off.
So what, you're kind of just trailing him and kind of from a distance, and you were, I think you ended up saying you were 2.5 miles away from camp, right?
That's what I figure. It was a very long way. I was at the edge of my perimeter.
Oh man! And then now, of course, you have to deal with this big animal and all these other animals that are hungry. So,
getting it in before everything started on. I mean, that night I went back in the dark, and I went back in the dark with my first load like this in my raincoat of smaller stuff, but it's still a heck of a load. And that night I had my headlamp. Everybody was given a headlamp. Mm-hmm. There was fox eyes coming down the trail. I had fox passing me on the way to that thing.
Yeah, it's a big stake. We got a muskox special down the road here.
Yes, sir. I mean, everything was honing in on that, keeping the birds off you. They showed some bird footage, every day. It took days and days to get that packed in. Yeah. And so every time you leave that, there's certain things you got to do to make sure nothing gets it, and I don't really want to give a lot of that away. But
of course, and you were, I'm sure you were very specific about the sequence. You don't have to give it away, but the sequence you took, the meat and the entrails and all that stuff had to have been as a result of what the other animals were going to be on first, I imagine, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, man. You take the choice cuts first. Yep.
Yeah, so that was a long haul, a bunch of trips back and forth, but
days and days, 8 or 9 trips.
And that feeling of when you still get wired thinking about it, is that the money? It's not just the money, but is it knowing that you're going to be able to just stay healthy? If you can stay healthy, you're going to be able to win this thing, or was it more of a primitive emotion that you were in touch with? Like, I just took down this animal that I'm going to now, it's going to keep me alive for a long time.
Well, I mean, it was strictly primitive. It was strictly the adrenaline of pulling that stunt off. It was kind of spooky. It was, I had to work myself up to that.
Dude, I mean, it made for amazing TV, and you got out of it somewhat scot-free. And in terms of, no injuries, which of course something could have gone wrong there. Speaking of injuries, you were concerned about Danger Rock a lot because it was dangerous as hell. It looked super dangerous. And you did fall down one time. Am I mistaken by that?
Oh, I probably fell down every day. That just happened to fall down hard with the camera on. That was a pretty good spill.
It's hard to tell with cameras anytime, really, the true terrain and the elevation.
No, you're exactly right. The cameras never get it. The cameras will never quite show you how steep it was.
I mean, but even still, there had to be pretty real risk of kind of rocks jutting out and hitting you. I mean, like landing on your face or something. That whole thing made me nervous. I was happy when you decided that you weren't going back out there for those season. Yeah.
Me and Danger Rock went around and around and around. I swore off of it a couple times, and it kept suckering me back in. I made Danger Rock pay, though.
Yeah, well, Danger Rock didn't take home any money, I'll tell you that much. You said something in the show that was just, I never thought of it this way, which is so cool. You had the mouse, or I think you called him just Mouse.
Mouse.
I'm not mistaken. Mouse, yeah. So you had Mouse, and he was sneaking in the meat crib and all this other stuff, but you decided once you shored up your storage situation that you were going to let him stay there. Explain that logic. I had never heard that, and I think I don't know. It's cool to think about. It's a different way of thinking than I had.
It goes back to a lot of my experience. It's sometimes if you're better off with what you got than what's, if I had killed Mouse, a whole bunch of mice might have run in. I think he was like a king mouse, keeping everybody. He was pissing me off. Mouse almost got it a couple times, but in the end, we got along.
Yeah, and so you never had any issues with that once you found the design flaw?
I mean, I had to keep moving stuff around. He was a little prick.
I mean, I wonder if he's got the same buzz that you had when you took down that muskox. Does he have the same buzz when he found his way into the, into meat crib?
I'm sure he did.
Probably did.
Mouse can get.
Yeah. So, I mean, what an incredible performance. It's like you're built to do it. Talk a little bit about the less tangible part of survival out there, which is, of course, the mental part of it. You're well adept at being on your own, but unfortunately, and I'm sorry about this, but you had lost your mother recently, and you hadn't seen a lot of your family because of your life. And talk a little bit about how that all played into the whole process, if you're willing to, of course.
Oh, yeah, no sweat. I'm glad for the question, because I dedicated the win to my deceased mother. Her name was Mona Welker, and I describe her sometimes as the strongest person I ever knew. She had a willpower that would just blow you away, and I draw a lot of strength. I believe a lot of my willpower comes from her. Mm-hmm. And, she'd give that to me through the blood. We didn't have a lot in common. It wasn't a mental thing. It's just how she was made, and it got passed on to me. And so, as I said, I was in Montana getting ready. I picked Montana to get ready for a number of reasons. I go all over the nation. It ain't nothing for me to show up someplace. And so Mother passes away, and I think she might have been one of the first Corona deals, to tell you the truth.
Oh, wow.
They died. It was a long time before the whole.
Yeah, but I wouldn't doubt that either. Yeah.
Well, they diagnosed. She had a bunch of surgeries, but then come down with some kind of pneumonia from in the hospital, I guess, and they called it some kind of weird Asian flu.
Wow.
6 months before the whole Corona crap. But so anyhow, that's going down back in Pensy. I'm clear out in Montana. I mean, I'm picking gear, making all these arrangements to pull this off. Right. And I dodged a funeral. I stuck that with Megan and my father and made them stay home and deal with it, and I skipped it. So that just fortified me a little bit more to see this through and dedicate the win to my mother, and got it done.
Dude, you so got it done. She has to be so proud. Have you talked to all your other family? I mean, have a lot of family that forgot about you? That you forgot about coming out of the woodwork now that you're Roland Welker, the millionaire bushman instead of just the bushman?
There's some people turning up.
Yeah, of course. And now you're kind of a celebrity.
It's all good.
Well, hey, it's better than not having one, right? For sure.
Yeah, man, I love it. If I didn't win, I'd be bummed. Now that I won, I can lighten up a little bit, because you can see I was kind of edgy there through the whole thing.
Oh yeah, I mean, you weren't. You ultimately were alone for the last 15 days. Were you the only one out there for the last 15 days? Was it?
I believe Callie was day 89. She made it to 89, if I remember correctly from watching. But I didn't know that. You don't know that. As a player, you don't know nothing.
Of course. I mean, they kind of. I was confused a little bit because in seasons past, one person won. This year, if you and Callie both would have made it, would you have both won money, or were you splitting it, or how did that work?
We had to split it.
Okay.
And then, Callie and Kylan both were great
so good
women. But, there was too much on the line. I didn't want to split that pot, and I didn't want to split the title.
No, of course not. Right, yeah, that's no disrespect to them. You're a competitive person.
I know. I got loads of respect for both of them, too.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole cast was – I was impressed with the cast. I mean, honestly – I would be lying if I didn't think that. Right when we first met you, I looked at my wife and I said, okay, that guy's, if there's a person in here doing it, it's this guy. And I was talking about you. But so since then, you become somewhat of a celebrity. Here we're talking, some strangers talking, but have you been recognized anywhere, or you're not really a city boy, so you don't really run into a lot of people, I imagine.
Well, I travel to different places, and I do run into a few people. There's been a couple sightings.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine. Dude, I can imagine. So, okay. Give some advice for those of us that are maybe a little bit less experienced, which is essentially everybody. Everyone listening is less experienced than Roland. Talk about Let's talk about getting woodsy. Give me some tips on how to get woodsy.
Well, to get woodsy, like me, you got to go live it. You'd have to move off the grid and live it. You can't do it by going. Now, a course or two would be good. People teaching some survival. You got to have some basics. Right. You got to read a few books. You got to go doing some weekend stuff with yourself. But to get truly woodsy, you got to go make your living in the woods. And most people can't do that because, okay, now it paid off for me, but I put in years and years and years at poverty level to acquire all these skills.
Right.
You can get woodsy if you want to, but most people really don't want to. And after about a month of it, they're out. I've seen them come and go.
Have you ever
this bad?
Yeah. Have you ever? You've been wanting this since you were a little boy. Yeah. Has it ever kind of come across your head of like wanting to move on to a different kind of lifestyle, or have you never wavered?
I did drift. When I do move on to a different lifestyle, it's still pretty intense. Like I like to do some logging, and that's spooky. That's the most. They say commercial fishing's more dangerous. I don't believe it. I think logging is hand down the most dangerous job on the face of the earth.
It looks like it.
So that's what I do when I need a diversion.
I'm gonna take some time off, relax a little bit, take down some trees.
Yeah, I love butchering down trees all day and putting them on a truck.
Man, you are an awesome duck. I love it, man. So talk a little bit about who are the old timers that you talk about, and you did a great job of paying homage and paying tribute to them through the way you live, and the way you explained things, the way you filmed it. I thought it was great. But who are the old timers in your mind? And, you know, how did you learn their ways? Was it just through reading and through all that, or what?
A lot of reading, a lot of research, because I was drawn to them. But you know, there was some old time. We all have old timers in our lives, and so I would spend hours and hours and go help the old timers do stuff. You know, my dad's friends or my grandpapa, his friends, even, you know, now these people are all gone, most of them. But then they'd tell me stories about theirs, plus all my reading, you know, into early American history. The men that came over here, and women, that came over here and carved the greatest civilization the world has ever seen out of nothing, only a mere 200 and some years ago. You know, the privatation and neglect they had to deal with, you know, to spear off into the Great Plains or the Ohio Valley with nobody around you and build a cabin while the Indians are trying to kill you. You know, these people were amazing. And I don't think nobody can quite be like them, not even me, just because we're too spoiled now with everything. Yeah. And those are the old timers.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, we're never that far. We're never completely far away from civilization if we had to be. Those people didn't have that. They were literally going to die out there.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And they did. For instance, just the immigrants on the Oregon Trail. When they left the East or the Midwest and went to Oregon, they're never going to see them other people again. When you left back then, you cut all ties. You didn't just get on a plane and go home for Christmas.
Right. Yeah, it's done. New set of people you're going to be around and everything. I mean, you're a faithful Christian person, and that was evident on the show. You did a great job living up to that as well, I thought. But maybe this isn't contradictory, maybe it is, but do you ever feel like you have some part of your soul that came from some old frontiersman, some old timer? Or is that just passed down through your mom and through your family, like you said, through the biology, I suppose?
Yeah, all my blood's from old times. Yes, sir. I come from a whole line of old timers. It's in the blood. Welker and Maines from Shiloh, Pennsylvania.
What is that? That's a Welsh name? Or Welker?
They say there's Welsh there. Yeah. There's a lot of German and English in central Pennsylvania as well.
Yeah. So here's what I'm watching you do all this. I'm watching your YouTube channel now, which is fantastic. You need to have your own show, man. So here's what I'm saying. Pretend like, not pretend. Let's put together a pitch for what the Roland Welker show is going to be. What would it be called? What would we do on it? And you should make it happen. I think you need to make it happen.
I think I can make it happen. I always did want to, even before Alone came out. I've pitched this to other people. One time I was in Cabo San Lucas when the National Geographic Seabird boat come in, giant ship full of National Geographicers, and I stood at the gate as they went in and out all day, hitting them all. It didn't go nowhere. I want to. I'll try anything.
Hell yeah.
I want to disappear for a year, and I guess we'll call it that too. Only I want, and it's going to be somewhat not supported, but I'm going to be supplied. You know, I'm not going to try to. I think it'd be cool to try to live off land for 100 days, a year.
Yeah.
And I would jump in on something like that. But I mean, I want to take in the basics. The old timers, like the Klondikers, the gold rushers and everything, or even the 49ers or any old timers that was going into the wilderness for a year, freighted. They took in a lot of supplies, you know, but it was all basics. I want to take in a little bigger outfit than we did in Alone, and some beans and flour and stuff too. Not a bunch of candy bars and crap like that. Just the basics the old timers would have had. I want to catalog all that, show it going in, getting it together going in. Here's the date we're leaving the whole shitty world behind, and then, you know, I'm there with my cameras and my SD cards, and I'll send the cards out, and I'm gonna build a log cabin and stay gone for a whole year.
That would
Western Alaska.
In Western Alaska. Okay. I mean, so there would be a really heavy educational bend to that, because you could actually explain about, you know, you could actually educate the viewers on why you're doing what you're doing in some cases, but also linking it back to the historical relevance of your choices and things like that. That would be a show.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I can take a few books too, and I can take a journal, and I'll journal every day. And yes, be reading some old timer stuff and link it with all that. And the cabin will be going up, and the seasons evolve, what we do this season and why we do it this season, and the whole thing.
That is so attainable. I feel like
I'm going to do that.
You can do it with your own. Yeah.
I want somebody to pick it up, but if they won't, I'm still doing that. I'll just put it out on my own website.
Hell yeah, dude. I'm down. I'll help you with the audio for it after you're done. Okay, well, man, we're 40 minutes in. You've been an awesome guest. Would you mind if I ask a couple more questions that some of your fans from Reddit have asked?
Yeah, let's try it.
Okay, so I kind of have them categorized here. So I picked a few that I really like. So one person asked, what was it like with the weekly segments with Colby? So you already knew you won, obviously, by doing the post-show interviews. How do you keep a poker face and not just want to was it hard to not show your emotion, to not talk about it, or how'd that all go?
Yeah, that was very difficult. The whole secret thing from the time you get picked until you're out and the winner's disclosed, it is really difficult to keep that suppressed. I avoided some people even, so I didn't have to deal with it.
Right.
And then to do it on the fireside, yeah, I mean, we had to keep that all highly professional. What did kind of bum me out on the fireside was the COVID thing struck, and it was all remote, and man,
yeah,
it's been cool to have been together for that, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely. Yeah, what a crazy. You came back and that was just about to heat up.
That was all Yeah, as soon as I came out, that started going on, and it has kind of been scrambling things ever since.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely not back to normal yet, for sure. Yeah. So when you already kind of told us this, but someone said, what is your home like when you're not in the wilderness? So you move around a lot and whatnot, but if your idea of relaxing is taking to the forest for some logging, I can't imagine you're living in the lap of luxury.
I like to read. If I get downtime, I read a book. I mean, I don't just flip through it. I'll read the damn thing, and if it's a good one, I'll read all day long. My home life's pretty strange compared to most people's stuff. I don't like to eat at certain times. I don't like to punch a clock. I don't know. If you're with me, you're doing my shit, or we're not getting along.
Dude, that's the way to be, man. I love it. All this new stuff is just nuisance and problematic anyway.
Right. If you're on the Roland Welker program, it's the Roland Welker program.
I dare you to say otherwise. I dare you. Let's see here. I have one more. Oh, this is a good one. Okay, we'll leave it with kind of a personal one. What is your favorite music, band, song? I mean, you're out there. I think they showed one clip of you singing, right? But you had to have had some music in your head or something, right?
Yeah, I was and still am a big country music fan. I like rock and roll too, almost any good music, but I grew up on Waylon Jennings, and
oh yeah,
Lonesome, Ornery, and Mean is probably my favorite song.
I can think of no better way to end this interview.
You should play that to end it. Yeah,
that's 100% what I'm gonna do. That's what's gonna be playing out when we play out. Roland, man, you were such an inspiration to watch. I mean that it was a weird time. It is a weird time now, but to be able to put on something where you kind of can see someone doing something a different kind of way without modern conveniences, I really think it had a psychological positive impact on the viewers. It did on my wife and I, for sure. You honored your mother so well, and all of the other folks that got you to where you are. Dude, keep it rolling, man.
Oh, don't worry, I will.
All right, peace out, Roland.
On a Greyhound bus, I was traveling this morning.
Thank you so much, Roland. You're such an inspiration, such a good guy, and let's face it, a freaking badass. Okay, right now you're hearing the second rendition of the day of Waylon Jennings' Lonesome, Ornery, and Mean. This one by Aaron Gentle, who actually was featured as the first guest of A Talk in the Attic, so go back in the back catalog and check it out. But make sure you stick around through Aaron's rendition, because there's a hip-hop version from friends of the program, Street Brokers, which sounds crazy, a hip-hop version of a Waylon Jennings song. but they knocked it out of the park, as did all the other artists. But this one specifically, they took a Waylon Jennings song, made it hip-hop, but also wrote lyrics specifically for Roland. Make sure you stick around and give that a shot. Check all these people out in the show notes. Go check out Roland's website, his YouTube. He sells some merch. Book a trip with him. Dude, how crazy awesome is this guy? Take it away, Aaron, and stick around for the Street Brokers. Peace!
Began to feel so lonesome, ordinary and mean.
I'm feeling kinda lonesome. Sipping on codeine, it got me ornery, and me, my baby, you might say I'm on one. All I need is me, my marijuana, a couple swishes, and a lighter by my lonesome. I ran out of papers like MacGyver. I made something out of nothing. Now I'm blowing. Put me in the middle with nowhere to go. 100 days and nights I'm going. Put me in the middle with nowhere to go. 100 days and nights I'm going. Put me in the middle with nowhere to go. 100 days and nights I'm going.